You would, it's 6 o'clock, let's find our way to our seats. Thank everyone for coming out tonight, May 2nd, 2017, 6 p.m., a regular scheduled board meeting. Tonight, I've asked Commissioner Fleming to open us with invocation and pledge. You would stand?
Let us pray. Our Father, as we come this afternoon, thank you for all your blessings you bestowed upon us. We thank you for this day. We pray to God that you give us strength, give us a mind, bless us to do your will, do the county business. Pray that you look over our county, our governmental system. Father, bless us. Keep us safe from all hurt, harm, and danger. Father, we love you. We thank you. This we ask in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, jumping right into the agenda, first order of business is approval of minutes. April 18th, 2017, regular scheduled board meeting. Do I have any changes or anything anybody needs to discuss in the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Second.
Got a motion to approve by Commissioner Sessions, second by Commissioner Fleming. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, moving on to consent agenda. We got item 2 through 13. Are any items anyone wishes to have pulled for discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve 2 through 13?
Motion approved. Second.
Got a motion to approve by Commissioner Fleming, second by Commissioner Hale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right. Moving right on to item 14, presentation of historical significance of the Douglas Center. Mr. Robert Ford.
My name is Robert Ford. My address is 8896 135th Loop, Live Oak, Florida. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Harris, Mr. Prevet, Eric, and I think I covered everybody on the dais up there. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chairman, I'm humbly express my appreciation to you and to Commissioner Fleming for allowing me this opportunity this evening to give this presentation on the historical significance of the Douglas Center. Mr. Chairman, with your consent, I'd like to have passed out to you a little information packet.
Yes, that's fine.
And I apologize not getting it to you in advance for you to read through it, but it's essentially just an information packet on the history of the Douglas Center with some endnotes and some bibliographical references in it. So I think it'd be a good reference material for you and the staff that have for future years. Mr. Chairman, please allow me just a small amount of latitude and tolerate me for just a moment. And I would like to give the board and the public just a small thumbnail of who I really am. Okay, I was born and I grew up right here in Suwannee County. I grew up in Dowling Park. I left Live Oak or Suwannee County when I was 17 years old when I enlisted into the United States Army. At 43 years old, I was discharged from the Army after 26 years on active duty. During my tenure in the United States Army, I mostly served in special operations and special missions assignments. After my military service, I worked 12 years with the Florida Department of Corrections, Probation and Parole Services in Orange Park, Clay County, and Duval, Jacksonville. My wife, Susan, of 47 years, and when we retired in 2007, we moved back to Suwannee County. And to be truthful, I did not envision my retirement to be what it is today. But it's the old Jewish proverb that says, man plans and God laughs. But I am a current active member of numerous organizations. I'm a member of the Suwannee County Voters League, NAACP, the American Legion, the Disabled Veterans of America, the Douglas Alumni Association, the Chamber of Commerce, the Veterans Parade Committee, and many more civic organizations and some benevolent organizations that I don't like to talk about in the public. I serve as a board of director on the Parks and Recs and Heritage Parks and Garden and the Police Athletic League. My wife and I are members of the Village Church at the Advent Christian Village in Darling Park, where I primarily grew up. And my number one passion in my life is my Christian walk, and with a close second is my family and my family devotion. And coming in a third distant second is advocating for veteran-related issues. I am a 100% combat-related disabled veteran. It's much more to me than most of you see of me when I'm standing at this podium advocating for or against something relating to the Douglas Center. And my objective this evening is to demonstrate to you, at least in my view, the historical significance of the Douglas Center, and to dispel the notion which have been inadvertently promulgated that the Douglas Center has no historical significance. And I hope to do this with the following critique. To my recollection, this Board of County Commission has taken 3 distinctive initiatives pertaining to the historical significance or the relevance as it relates to the Douglas Center. The first one was a 2016 special grant application, grant number 16-0028. It was a grant for the Douglas High School cafeteria rehabilitation for $350,000, and it was submitted in 2014. And the State Bureau of Historical Preservation response was the scope of work in the application was not sufficient to make a determination, so that grant really didn't go any place. And the second initiative this board took was a 2017 special category grant application, grant number 17-0028. I'm sorry, 17-0018. I'm going to use that word, just grant application. I won't use that special category just for expediency. And this grant was for the same thing, the Douglas cafeteria for $350,000, and it was submitted in 2015. Now, the State Bureau Historical Preservation response was a little more detailed in this grant application. And what they basically said that it was no historical designation, not enough remaining fabric to constitute a viable restoration project, and the information regarding the historical significance in the application block number 20, which includes the narrative of Douglas High School, which was requested, does not present a case of significance for evaluation, and not at the original location. The significance lies at the original location of Douglas High School, which was on Houston Street, which we'll cover a little bit later on. And the majority of the use it was used as a integrated school rather than solely as a African American culture. In other words, they determined that no historical significance was due. Now, I want you to remember these findings that I just highlighted, because I will use them in the next area and a little bit later on in the presentation. And the third action the county took was the board approved a request from the Douglas Alumni Association for a Florida Heritage Landmark historical marker. An intent of this was to give the Douglas Center a historical designation. The Alumni Association agreed to cover the total cost for this marker, which would be approximately $2,200, and we expect to provide the administrative assistance in the application process. In other words, the Alumni Association was willing to put some skin in the game, because this was kind of asked from the board sometime that we need to kind of step forward and put some investments in some of the items that we are requesting. In anticipation of providing the administrative assistance for the marker application, which requires a bibliography of sources documenting the site historical relevance. Since this is an alumni initiative, and I'm aware that when the county admin staff begin on the marker application, that we, the alumni, would be called upon to provide the historical relevancy documenting what we want. Knowing this, I had a problem reconciling in my mind the historical relevancy of the marker that we was asking for, with the backdrop of comments from the grant application, which I just talked about above, which states in part there was no historical significance. So I'm paraphrasing this, but on more than one occasion, I can recall staff making public comments about the DC. They're about the Douglas Center. Their statements were similar to the language used in the grant application. They essentially stated that there was no historical significance, at least in the buildings at the Douglas Center. A couple of weeks ago, our county administrative staff honored my request and gave me copies of the 2016 and 2017 grant applications. And when I received the copies of the grant application, then it became obvious to me why the State Historical Bureau would make the determination they did regarding the historical significance on what was asked for in the grant application. I believe it is simple, but this is the crux of the issue. Both grant applications were submitted in the name of Douglas High School rather than the Douglas Center. For historical grant application, I suspect for all grants, wording absolutely matters. And I want to use this analogy, and I hope it's an appropriate analogy that you can follow. Mr. Greg Scott, I think I seen him back there, he's the director of Parks and Rec, and he's also directs of the airport, but for this analogy, we're just talking about Parks and Rec. We commonly call the Parks and Rec Department Suwannee County Parks and Recreation Department. Note, Suwannee County Parks and Recreation Department. I think Greg will agree with me, in some particular settings, some people will feel slighted by that statement or by that name, Suwannee County Parks and Recreation Department. The actual name is Live Oak, Suwannee County Parks and Recreation Department. When the Parks and Rec apply for a grant, and they are very, very good at securing grants for this community. Recently, they secured a $1 million Unique Abilities Grant, two $500,000 grants, one for Heritage Parks and Garden and one for the Sportsplex. Now, if you're paying attention to what I'm saying right here, if you recall, I serve on both the Heritage Park and Garden and the Parks and Recreation Board. Now, you may just conclude that it may be a common denominator here. Now, that's just a little light note, right? I just threw that in there, but, back to the analogy. When Parks and Rec applies for a grant, they have to specify if it is a live oak park or if it's a county park. If not, in all likelihood, that grant application would be kicked back for corrections, amendments, or outright rejected. In other words, words matter. If I were to give the county a letter grade for its effectiveness in securing grants, I probably would give the county an A-. I feel what's keeping the county from getting a solid A grade would be in the area of historical grants. Our county is wise to use grant writers for our Community Block Grant, or CBG grants, simply because these are very, very complicated and intricate grants. And it's my understanding that a incentive-based grant writer does not get paid unless he is successful or if they are successful in securing the grant. If I'm accurate or partly accurate, I feel it would be worth considering to use the incentive grant writer for our historical grants, specifically for the Douglas Center. On the other hand, at least use some type of intra-department collaboration or collaborate with other local agencies which may be more experienced with the historical grant process. And I have prepared for the board consideration a packet that I passed out to you, which outlines the history of when and where and the Douglas Center was created and for what purpose. There is a clear-cut difference between the history and the purpose of Douglas High School, which was a secondary educational studies, was created for secondary educational studies for African American during that period. On the other hand, the history and the purpose of the Douglas Center, which was a school facility which consisted of a multidisciplinary educational departments. The Douglas Center consisted of a primary or elementary school and a secondary grades department, which during that period was sometimes called junior secondary or junior high and upper secondary or senior high school. I'm not alone, and many others are guilty of using the term Douglas High School as a generic term when referring to the Douglas Center. It can cause problems when we use these names synonymously, especially with grant application. And in this case, a tangle web has been created which can be difficult to understand and more difficult to untangle. I started the school in 1955. There was no kindergarten during that period. I started at Douglas Elementary School, which was located on the Douglas Center. Footnote, my wife Susan, I talked about her a while ago, 47 years, we was in the same class of that Douglas High School elementary class in 1955, and I think I see one or two of my other classmates back there, James and maybe some more of them I can't put my eye on. But anyway, our teacher during that time was Miss Frances Shelton, and there's a road named after her out on 136 West, across from the Sheriff Department Operations Center. At that time, when I started school at the Douglas Center, Douglas High School was still located on its original location on South Houston Avenue. Susan and I graduated together from Douglas High School, which by that time, it was located at the Douglas Center. We was in Douglas High School class in 1967, and we'll be celebrating our 50th class reunion in a couple of months. That's the Golden Jubilee class reunion. I am hopeful the information in the packet which I'm providing will be sufficient to illuminate the circumstances of the culture here in Suwannee County in the 1940s and 1950s and the evolving educational needs of African Americans, which led to the creation of the historic Douglas Center facility. On another interesting note, there was plans for an African American junior college to be located on the Douglas Center site. I'm told that due to the politics of that time, that junior college was located in Madison County. The name of it was Suwannee River Junior College, and it was later merged with North Florida Community College. The historical Douglas Center was established as a distinct facility within itself in the early 1950s, and it was a multidisciplinary education department which composed of Douglas Elementary, Douglas Junior High, and Douglas Senior High School. And for your consideration, the exact date of the genesis of the historical Douglas Center was May 1st, 1950. And it's ironic, as of yesterday, it was May 1st, it was 67 years ago when the Douglas Center was created. To be clear, the Douglas Center represents far more than Douglas High School, which came to be located on the Douglas Center site in about 56, 57 school year. The historical Douglas Center represents a collective institution of all African American education pursuits in Suwannee County. And I believe this sums up, in my view, the historical significance of the Douglas Center. And I want to thank you for this opportunity and I will try to entertain any questions that you may have. But I just want to make this one comment. And I was talking to Commissioner Fleming the other day, and he too attended Douglas Elementary at the Douglas Center. And in that history that I provided you, it will list another school that Ms. Lawrence attended, O'Brien School, down on the south end of the county. Now I'm ready to entertain any questions if you have any, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. I don't have a question. Never cease to amaze me the amount of work you put into this. I appreciate just the privilege to sit and listen to it, but I don't have any questions, and if anyone else does, I'd be glad to entertain them.
Mr. Chairman, I have it's not a question, but we, alumni asked us about some work that they want to do out there, some repairs, and we want to have some clear understanding that we want to do this work under the county administrator, public works director, and I'm offering a motion that we reimburse them amount of $400 for some supplies that have been purchased or will be purchased out there at the Douglas Center. I did meet with Mr. Ford and other gentlemen, and I didn't say the amount, but I didn't tell him, but I'm offering that we reimburse them $400 for supplies that they purchased or will be purchased.
So, Mr. Fleming, this is a $400 reimbursement for what we had previously authorized the Douglas alumni to do some work. I believe it was in the men's restroom.
Right.
And you're not asking for reimbursement of labor, it's just for some parts that they had to.
Just for parts.
So,
Supplies.
so is that a definite cost, or is that just up to $400?
Just up to $400.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Fleming? I got a motion on the floor to reimburse the Douglas alumni up to $400 for parts related to the men's restroom repair.
I second it.
Got a second by Commissioner Sessions. Any further comments?
I have some discussion, please, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Attorney.
Just briefly, I know that they went out there after the last meeting that, I think that occurred, the April meeting, April 3rd meeting is when it was approved that y'all could go and do some work out there, the Alumni Association. Problem I have with it is that if you're going to be doing work, on the county facility, there are certain things we have to do as a county to make sure that everything's going fine. One of those things is you need to be in touch with Public Works or with Greg's office, either one, depending on which facility that you may be doing work at. The second thing is that when you go and do the types of work that involve, permitting and that type of thing, whether it be electrical or plumbing work, roofing work, that require permits to be able to do that, that you also have to have somebody that's doing the work that's either supervised by somebody that has the appropriate license, or you have to have a license to be able to do that. So, and we also have a volunteer type process, so that you can look to see that the volunteer does have the appropriate licensing, does have, workers' comp or whatever is, required to be out there for that. And it's another matter to just reimburse for the costs and stuff, but, for the costs of the fixtures in this particular case. But we need to be careful that we're using appropriate contractors and you have the correct volunteer forms there, because otherwise, you're running amok of what our insurance requirements, may be. I know the intentions are good, and we want to go ahead and, do that, but we need to make sure that we do address those steps before we go out there. I believe last time we went out there and did some work prior to taking care of these other requirements. So if you just, as we move forward, if you just take care of those few little steps.
Thank you very much. Very well taken.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right, I got a motion by Commissioner Fleming, second by Commissioner Sessions. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I got a question. Is that $400 to be reimbursed out of the fund for the Douglas Center?
Yes.
Yes. All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, Mr. Ford, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to time-specific items at 6:10 PM or soon thereafter, if the matter can be heard. Presentation by the Florida Department of Transportation County Works Program Priorities. Barney Bennett and Bill Henderson, Florida Department of Transportation.
My name is Barney Bennett with the Florida Department of Transportation out of Lake City, and we have two handouts for you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir.
How you doing tonight? Because they change.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And Bill Henderson's with me tonight, and I think you all know Bill Henderson. He's been with the department for quite some time. In fact, he's been with the department since 1979. As such, he has decided he's had enough time with the department, and he's going to start going fishing for a while, starting in a couple of months. So this will be Bill Henderson's last county commission meeting with Suwannee County, and as he'll be retiring on June 30th. The couple things I want to talk about. First is the Complete Streets Handbook. The brochure we have looks like this. This is a brochure that introduces our handbook. The genesis of this is we've always had a context-sensitive solution policy, that is, provide the right road in the right location. However, in our gradations or classifications of our roadways, we always classified them as just either rural or urban, and then we had a little bit in between. Your rural or urban, and then we had fixed speed limits within those, and that was in our plans preparation manual. Now what we're going to do is take that context-sensitive classification and spread it out, so we have 8 gradations of context classification that gradually classifies a roadway from rural to urban. Then within those classifications, you go to the Florida Design Manual, and that will set a range of speed limits instead of a fixed speed limit. What that speed limit does is that dictates lane widths, it dictates clear zones, and that allows for us to vary how much bike path and sidewalk space is available. So this gives a way to better adopt a roadway to the location that it's being put into. This is a philosophy. It's not a funded program. In other words, we're not going to come in and be doing complete streets projects. However, as we move forward in time, as we resurface roads and rebuild roads, we will assign a context classification. We will then get with the jurisdiction, the agency who has jurisdiction, either be a city or county, to look at that classification, to go over the design speeds, which then set the other parameters of setbacks for bike paths, sidewalks, and lane width, and so on. There are workshops on this context-sensitive classification, or the Complete Streets Handbook, in September. The main thing is, though, the handbook is out in a draft format now and is up for comment. The handbook can be found on flcompletestreets.com, and there's a place to enter comments into there, and those comments are due on May 26th. This information was emailed out to all the cities and counties. If you didn't get it, let us know, and I'll make sure you get it. Or if you just go to CompleteStreets.com and please get a hold of your city leadership as well. Make sure they're aware of it. This affects cities far more than it affects the rural county areas. This is also for state roads only. It does not affect county roads. In other words, when we do the Scrap and Scott projects, this does not affect those. This is strictly for the state roadway system. So any questions on Complete Streets?
This affects state roads only.
State roads only, and it only affects designs that are starting in January of 2018 and later. So anything that's under design right now is going on the current plans preparation manual.
So the overpass on 129 going over the railroad tracks, that would be after 2018, or is that, you're going to try to fit that in before then?
Where's the design on that one?
You're not aware of that yet?
I guess not.
I'll get with you on that later.
You need to get with me on it. We need to have a talk.
You'll fly over.
The second thing I'd like to talk about real quickly is the Scrap and Scott program. Last time we were here, we talked about having a web-based application for it. Unfortunately, that was not successful. We've had to scrap it and start over from scratch again. We are now redeveloping the web-based application. However, when we request projects come this September, we'll request new projects. They'll be due to us in December. Whether we do it web-based or whether we do it with paper or PDF type format, we are going to reduce the number of applications to 3 total. So instead of submitting 2 applications for each program, we'll ask for 3 applications in total, and then we will select the program. The reason we're doing that is we are getting far, far more applications than we have funding for. So for instance, this year we received 85 applications. We could only fund 10 projects. Last year we received 84 applications. We could only fund 10 projects. We've got a backlog of underfunded projects that we're backfilling in right now. So the number of new projects is kind of low. That'll pick up in the future. So for right now, to reduce our workload, because we're not programming any additional projects over and above what we're receiving applications for, it'll help us quite a bit. The other thing we do is when we receive applications, again, we were getting 2 for scrap, 2 for SCOP, we'd invariably change the funding anyway. So what we're really going to ask for is you provide us what project you want. We'll determine the fund code that'll go under. It'll really make it easier in the long run. But it will be fewer applications that will be soliciting for. So it'll be 3 under scrap, SCOP, SIGB, TRIP, and then 2 under the Transportation Alternatives Program.
Let me ask a question real quick. Go ahead. This does not affect any potential TRIP applications for TRIP projects?
No, none of the current applications you talked about that are in, or
I'm not talking about any that exist right now. I'm talking about some that I'm considering applying for. Would that, my question is if it would be considered one of my 3 that we can turn in.
yes, it would be considered one of the 3. So for Suwannee County in the past, you could have turned in up to 8 applications, I believe, because you're a TRIP agency. So you got TRIP, SIGB, SCRAP. In reality, we can't fund that number of projects, so we don't need that number of projects in. So what you would do is you'd keep the project, define the project, let us figure out the funding to fund it.
Okay. I've got 5 county commissioners that I work for, and I've got 3 projects that I can turn in each year. I just want to make sure that we're all clear on that.
That's all you need is 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are quite aware of that as well.
Good. I appreciate that.
Any questions
That.
on the board?
Or we can go over to the work program
Sure.
projects, and I'm going to have Bill speak to the projects.
Okay, real quick, we just passed out our citizens plan for the 5 years, 18 to 22. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm touch base on a few of them. At the top is the interstate lighting. We've been talking about that for years, getting those interchanges lit. That's going to happen, as well as 129, getting that lit from the city limits up to the interstate. Also, there's down at the bottom, there's some scrap and SCOP, the 2 on the bottom. And those drainage improvement projects in the middle are with the Water Management District. That's finally going to happen to do some improvements on the drainage. I also want to talk about 3 projects that do not show up on this list, very briefly. The first one, gentleman mentioned Dowling Park. We are going to replace the bridge over the Suwannee River at Dowling Park, the County Road 250 bridge. Of course, that connects Suwannee and Lafayette County. That's why it doesn't show up on Suwannee County, because it's in 2 counties. So I wanted to bring that up. That's going to go to construction in May of 18. It will let from construction May of 18, and that's an $11,800,000 project. So that's a pretty big project to replace that bridge. That's a pretty important bridge for the region. Also, I want to talk about 2 other off-system bridges that I'm sure y'all are familiar with. The first one is 180th Street, kind of the old culvert bridge that you just did some repair work on SCOP. Right now, we have it programmed to look at a study to look at how we can replace that bridge, because from what I understand, the Scott project did not bring it up to the load rating, and the county wishes that bridge to be fully. So we're going to start looking at that, how we can replace it, and there's no funding on it now, but it's a candidate for 2022, so that could get replaced by then. The other one I want to talk about is 164th Street. Also, that doesn't show up. That is a project that we did a little quick kind of feasibility study to see if we could rehabilitate it. And we're probably going to try to get some money to do a little bit more on that. You know, that's an historic bridge, so we're going to have to kind of look at that a little carefully. But right now, we're kind of thinking about maybe trying to do that one in 2022 as well. And that's, if you got any questions on the work program, Barney and I will try to answer it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
on the lighting, you know, you made it clear, as you said, that it's been years that we've been talking about these items on the lighting. And staff have, you know, I know there have been conversations in the lighting. Can you pinpoint, give us a definite time, a definite date when when those lightings?
Okay, the I-10 at US 129, the high mass matting is going to let this month, May of 17.
May of 17.
The 129 lighting that goes up the road for 2 miles from the city, that's also going to let May of 17.
Okay, let me stop you a minute. So this would go from Window Weedle to 129, to the interchange?
10.
Yeah, it goes, the notes here just say from Live Oak County line to I-10.
Okay.
That's correct. That's the pedestrian lighting and street side lighting that goes all the way up to 10. And then the tower lights at the interchange.
Right, and that's going to be let this month, May of 17. Now, the other two interchange projects, we got a lighting at US 90 and I-10, and at County Road 137 and I-10, they will go in February of 19.
Okay.
The bridge, do you have any specific details on the bridge in Downland Park?
Yes, it's going to be, it's going to go in May of 2018. We're going to have to buy some right-of-way on it, and that's underway right now. The bridge, will keep it open completely during construction. What we're going to do is, it's called an offset construction. We're just going to build a new bridge to the south of the existing bridge. And then when it's finished, they'll tear that one down.
Okay.
And we had a public meeting on this back before Christmas at the Advent Christian Center, and had a great turnout, so the citizens there kind of know what's coming.
Yes, sir. Any further questions?
That's it. That's all I
I've got
have.
a couple of questions.
Mr. Harris?
Any ideas regarding the balance of funding that's going to be necessary for reconstructing and widening 49? I mean, currently the funding starts at the south end at 27 and comes up a certain distance and stops. It doesn't make it all the way up to 90. I mean, we're going to have a real nice piece of road there, but it'd be nice to continue it north. I mean, you don't know on that one. I was hoping it would show
Yeah.
up here. Yeah, that'll be real important because there's some significant failure there right now on the portion farther north that hasn't so far been funded.
Was that all you had, Mr. Harris?
I've got a question about the bridge, and I don't know if you are familiar enough with the details of looking closely at that 164th bridge.
Yeah.
I understand that it's a historic bridge, and I've actually been talking with different parties with DOT for 6 years about that bridge. In fact, we had some engineers come in once with Mr. Green, Jordan Green, when he was coming and visiting with us. We looked at that historic bridge and talked about some ideas that those gentlemen had regarding trying to preserve some of the historic character. I would love to get additional information before anything actually goes to bid on that thing.
Oh, it's a long way from going to bid. It's 20, we still got that study you're talking about with those engineers, that was just kind of a preliminary feasibility type thing. We've got a lot more to do on that bridge.
Yeah, well, let me get to my point, because all of that lot more may be too far gone by the time someone listens to this question. So here's my question. If in an attempt to preserve the field stone that's on the sides of that thing ends up making that bridge cost 20 times more than what it could be replaced with, I'd love to have that conversation with DOT when that determination is made. Because we started that conversation out there in the field, standing on that bridge. And what was communicated to me was that it could cost significantly more to try to preserve that bridge than to remove it and replace it. I'm not a bridge expert, but I know that money's tight for DOT, and I appreciate the comments that you've made about the funding being insufficient for the last few years. I don't know how many more years it's going to take to get those projects that were underfunded. I don't know if that was a 5-year cycle that we have to finish up before sufficient funding is back in place. But it certainly affects the bridges as well, and I just hate to see money thrown away if it's cheaper to reconstruct that thing than to try to preserve it.
Yeah,
It's in PD&E now?
yes, it will be.
Yeah. Can you tell me what that cost was for that PD&E? Is that a $700,000-$800,000?
What that is we have a cap on it. It's task-based. So what we do is we'll put a cap on it, and we'll task them for certain things and get a cost for it. It's a very cost-effective way to do these studies. We program a couple $400,000, but normally we don't spend it all. It all depends what kind of issues we come up with.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, these bridges are the federal off-system bridge. I hate to say it, when it's federal money, there's a little more hoops you got to jump through.
A lot more hoops.
Yes.
We've experienced that. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Anything from any commissioners? I just want to thank you all for everything you do, especially for all the hard work over the past, 8 or 10 years that DOT's put in with Suwannee County on Perimeter Road. We're about to finally wrap that up. I know y'all have to be glad from that end, y'all's end, and we're glad on our end. But we appreciate the teamwork and the help. Driven it a couple times, it's going to be a huge asset to Suwannee County. Nothing else. Y'all don't have anything?
Good. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Appreciate you.
Enjoy your retirement.
Yeah, Bill, good luck.
And I've enjoyed coming to Suwannee County. Y'all been a great group to work with through the years.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Mr. Ward has a comment on it.
Yes, Jim Ward, 27476 29th Place, Brantford. Thank you very much for getting that light down on 27 working properly. It's doing really good. Mentioning that intersection on 27 where 49 and 129 come together, it's probably a county responsibility regardless. On the north side, on the 49 side, all the paint's gone. You can't tell the turn lanes from anything. The only way you can tell where to line up, even begin to tell, is from the mechanisms in the pavement. There's nothing there. It really needs to be repainted.
We can take care of that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, gentlemen, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to staff reports. Next is Alvin Jackson's very short presentation.
Ernie, why are you laughing?
Timer's on, we've got 3 minutes.
Okay. It's another great evening, Chairman, Board of County Commission. I do have a short presentation and not really a presentation. Just want to share with you, we're busy here in Suwannee County. A lot of prospects looking at sites and buildings. We don't have enough inventory, but that we have. Also, we're working, finally have started some talks with a developer that may be interested in doing a private-public partnership on a 60,000 square foot distribution building. 129, as it relates to commercial and retail, it is on fire. And the city, once again, really needs to make sure, I was talking with the city manager, that we start addressing the infrastructure needs that exist there on 129. Also have had some talks with two individuals as it relates to the 136, 75. Might be some interest in picking up some of that, what we call it, slum and blight that's out there. So those are some of the things that's occurring that I really can't give much detail on. Want to just say that May 1st was our deadline for our reporting on our incentives, and our three companies, Klausner, Shenandoah, and Southern Cross, did submit on time, so we will be evaluating that. The movie is complete. They're heading, they did get an invitation in Europe, and so they will be going there next month, this month, in May, to see if there's any takers for that movie. So that's a good thing. They spent about $12,000 with local vendors in the 30 days and paid about $30,000 in salaries with those that participated in the movie. And I think that's about it. Any questions?
Is that the movie you starred in?
My bus started in it.
His bus starred in it, and yeah, they at the last minute did not have a judge, so I ended up being the judge. 3 hours of saying the same lines over and over and over.
Judge Jackson.
Any questions?
Any questions for?
You know, at the state, you know, I guess they're meeting now, 5 o'clock, so we still don't know, you know, what the economic development agenda will look like. There are some infrastructure dollars that's in that fray also. So, you know, we're just trying to see, I guess, by what, 7 o'clock tonight?
Yeah.
That budget should be completed?
Till the dust clears tomorrow.
Yeah, and so we have no idea where our sewer project is. All I know is it just went into that fray over the weekend. So we should know something by tomorrow.
All we can do is hope for the best.
Yep. All righty, I'll be back next time with my 2-hour presentation.
No, you won't. Prayer tonight.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to mention just a little small wrap-up about the fly-in, very big success. The group definitely needs to tweak the dates a little bit on some activities and such. The good news is they flew over 201 kids in the Young Eagles program, no cost to them. It's pretty cool to watch what apparently would be single moms bringing young kids up to fly, and that experience that you don't just get a chance to fly on a plane for free very often. And just watching that expression of those kids and those proudness of the parents watching their kids have that experience was pretty cool. Just a neat experience, and really appreciate the cooperation between Public Works, landfill, fire rescue, different departments really helped pitch in and do their parts, and it was a really big success for the community, so thank you.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, I heard great things about it. Any other department heads? Seeing none. Moving on to general business, number 17, discuss with possible board action amendment to procurement policy and adoption of enabling resolution. Turn our attention to Randy Harris.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we put information in your packets, and we were still revising and trying to clean some things up in this policy. I will say that probably the most substantive changes in here had to do with the limits on authorized purchases and who signs for those. We didn't really change the signatures that much, but we did change the authorizations, but we changed the limits on those as a proposal. In addition to that, the copy that you received when you got here is the latest version, and I'd say the majority of what changed after we sent it out in the packet had to do with the order that the document was in. I think even the last time we changed this, a few years back, I think it was 4 years back maybe, what we had changed at the time were the limits then, to try to catch up with inflation and, just the cost of doing business. So we made changes back then, but a lot of language that had already existed in the procurement policy, in my opinion, it was either poorly written or incomplete. So we tried to clean up a lot of that and then rearrange the document. You'll notice significant changes in the table of contents where we tried to put things in the proper order. But outside that, the most substantive changes had to do with the purchase limits. I think that you've seen, even in the last year, lots of items that keep coming back to the board with purchases that your departments could easily handle if the limits were higher without coming back here. I think that's what those limits were established for a long time ago, and it's just time to upgrade those. So I'm prepared to answer any questions if you have them.
Anybody from the board have any questions for Mr. Harris? Any discussion on the issue?
Mr. Chairman, if the board entertains a motion, go ahead and approve these. We have an alternative resolution that's a little more general that the county attorney prepared. We've given copies to Eric for the chairman's signature. The previous one had a lot of dates on it, just reflections of dates that it had changed previously that didn't need to be in the resolution. Mr. Pravat prepared one that's a little more brief and concise than that.
All right. Thoughts, concerns, comments? Motion to approve?
I have one. On the emergency, on 8, was 8C, or was C?
What page are you on?
Page 11. Is the emergency going to be based on a county emergency, state emergency, like with a,
It would be a county emergency. I'll give you a good example of that. The generator that went out at the jail that needed to be replaced or repaired exceeded our purchase policy. Now, while we were trying to get it back to the board for the board to give us some authorization to go forward, the sheriff's department was calling about every day saying, hey, what's going on with this generator? If power goes down, we're in trouble. I had spoken to the chairman about that. That's just an example. So no, this wouldn't be under a state of emergency. This would be an emergency that we incurred where we might otherwise bring something back to the board because it exceeded the authorization for outright purchase, that $15,000 figure. It allows the chairman to authorize up to a $25,000 expenditure in case of an emergency and then report it back to the rest of the board in the next regular board meeting. That process is always in place. It's just the limits that are proposed in here are different.
all right, that's just something I wanted to make sure. I wasn't sure if it was something like a hurricane situation or just something like that. So I just wanted to make sure we had a discussion on that.
It would work in the hurricane situation, but it isn't limited to that.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
do we, Mr. Harris, do we have a place where those emergencies are listed? So what is designated as an emergency, or is it kind of open to whatever
Well,
someone feels is an emergency?
we don't have a list. What an emergency would be to us is something like I just alluded to. If we have sufficient authorization for purchase, the routine business transactions, and then we have sufficient time to come in and put an agenda together and bring it before the board. If it's something that exceeds those thresholds, we do that. We always have. This is only in a case where something occurs that needs to be taken care of before we can get back to a regular board meeting, and it gives the chairman an additional $10,000 threshold there that he can exercise if he's convinced that it's an emergency. They can't wait until we take action and start the process at the next meeting.
Well, the correction, it's an additional $15,000, and I don't have a problem with the $15,000 threshold. Mr. Chairman, I had a conversation with our neighboring county administrator over in Columbia County, and where they're at, he said this is a good first start. So they're at a lot higher than we are, and I know that they deal with things a lot bigger than we do. But on that issue that I talked about, and it's nothing against you in any way, shape, or form, or our current chairman, I would strongly advise not to leave it up to, what's the way to put it? Discretion. I would like to have something, what you just said, written down that's approved for emergencies. So that way, future boards, though they can change it, they'd have to go through a vote to change it. It wouldn't be something that's just up to the discretion of the chairman and the
I have a comment on that.
future administrator.
Not to revoke what you're saying, but a finite list of certain things, if that's all that you can work off of, you limit yourself in a real emergency situation. Let's just say a child fell down a pipe in the ground, and we had no equipment in this county, and we had to call for some equipment to come in, some big, heavy equipment that could help rescue someone like this. And I'm sure it would be at more than $25,000 to mobilize that equipment and get here to save somebody's life. That's something we're not going to think of, when we're making lists of things like that. So I've seen too many times where things have come up that you haven't thought of before. And if we have a list like that and we say, nope, sorry, it's not on the list, life could be lost too. So that's where my only issue is. I like to have lists and plan ahead, but you never know what's going to come up that could be an emergency. So that's why I'm not really.
This is actually very rare that this even occurs.
Yeah,
I think
it
this
is.
happened maybe
But I mean, like
twice.
that situation at the jail, that could be something we could list. But if we stick to a finite list, then we may limit ourselves.
And I'm not speaking about a list, I'm speaking about the explanation you just gave me that provides some parameters. Some parameters. They don't have,
Okay.
they can be general.
Guidelines, I
But at least
understand.
guidelines.
Yeah,
So that
okay.
the discretionary.
I thought you meant more specific, so
Can be more
guidelines are better.
articulated to the public.
Okay.
It is their money.
Yep,
No
it is.
doubt. And it's not blind spending. I mean, it has to still be authorized by the chairman, so the chairman's got to come back and answer to the board. And
Again.
he has to announce it to you at the next board meeting.
Again, this is nothing against the
Oh,
current administrator.
I
or
understand.
current chairman, I just, for future reference, I would like to see some general guidelines.
What's the wishes of the board? I mean, just from what I've seen on my time on the board, I don't have a problem with it. I think the limits are good. I don't have a problem looking at a definition for emergency, but I don't, under the way it's operated since I've been here, I don't know that it's actually needed. But if that's the board wishes to go that route, I can go either way.
Well, may I make a suggestion, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
May I make a suggestion to the county administrator? These changes are, to me, they can be made without having to have a definition in place. We can go ahead and if the board would like to approve these changes, I'm all for it. I just would like to come back at a later date with the suggested definition for emergencies, if the board would agree to that.
I'll tell you what I
At least-
can do. I mean, I can add the text in that section that I entered into the record a minute ago. I'll put some language in here that says if it's an item or an issue of urgency that cannot wait until the next regularly scheduled board meeting, the chairman then steps in and authorizes. I can add that language if that helps. That's because that's the only occasion that would occur.
Yeah, we're not talking about downed equipment or anything like that. We're talking, unless it's just vital to the operations of, or public safety, like the
Yes.
generator for the jail is what.
Public safety would be a good criteria for that.
I'll come up with some language. If the board goes ahead and approves this, I'll come back and, in fact, I'll get with the county attorney and we'll come up with some brief language and add to that section and then bring you a copy back in your next meeting as well.
Based on that, Mr. Chairman, I would offer a motion to approve the changes to
Procurement policy
I'll second.
Can they include the resolution or is it?
and the associated resolution.
And the
The
rest.
associated resolution, yeah. I got a motion to approve the changes and the resolution by Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Fleming. Any further discussion? Hear none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Moving on to item 18, discuss with possible board action adoption of a policy to establish a municipal service benefit unit. County Administrator Randy Harris.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we've had a couple of requests. This is a very common practice throughout the state of Florida. Florida statutes provide for a procedure wherein citizens who live on, I'm just going to use this as an example because this is what we've had the most calls on in the last couple of years. Citizens live on an unpaved road or an unimproved road, and they want to take it upon themselves to pay for the improvements, but they need a mechanism and some assistance with that from the county. That assistance would be limited to our assisting them in finding the right lending agency at the right interest rates, having some public hearings, petitioning all the owners on the property, assessing what type of support there is for the project, that type of thing. What we've put together here is a very brief outline of a process that is very typical in counties across the state. I know that Suwannee County had a couple of MSBU programs in the past, and I think that they were kind of put together at the time without necessarily an outline. What we've tried to do is create a very concise outline. If the board agrees with this, County Attorney and I can put some more language together that will give a more exhaustive explanation for those parties that may come forward requesting to be a part of an MSBU program for road improvements or other things within the county. But this is just a start. So I'd like to ask for the board's consensus on this. If you agree that this is the direction that we need to go in, then just let us know that, and we'll come back with something soon, because we do have at least two groups right now that are interested in talking about road improvements at their expense. What traditionally happens is, following a public hearing, if a board is convinced that there's a majority in support of a project, and the board would establish that percentage required to establish the type of positive feedback from the community that you want to try to identify. Following that, though, if the board approved it, typically financing would be set up for 5 years or 7 years with a low-interest loan. Those property owners would have their percentage of that show up on their tax bills every year for the 5 years or 7 years until it's paid off. Very often, they're given an opportunity to pay up front. For those parties that want to do that, they get a discount rate because they don't have to pay as much interest on it, and it's then adjusted with the lending agency when the loan is established. It does not become a general debt obligation of the county. It's associated with the properties out there that are associated with the road improvement itself.
Any questions for Mr. Harris?
Have one for council.
All right.
Yes, sir.
If 60% of the people are okay with it, are 100% of the people along the road, let's say,
Obligated?
liable and
Yes.
obligated?
Yes.
Yes, they are.
That's correct.
What I'm getting at is, I don't know why we shouldn't have 100% participation on this, because can they come and sue us to say they weren't in favor of this, and yet they're having to pay the taxes?
No, the actual requirement is 50% plus one
Plus one.
person.
That's fine.
And that's the only comment I would make. There are actually two comments. If you look in the second, it says step one, the first line right there. To initiate the process, instead of just having one owner, come up and say, oh, I'd like for you to go through this process. I had suggested, the 10% property owners, that in the whole area that would initiate the process. If you don't have 10%, then you don't go through any of the other steps that you go here. And I had suggested the greater than 50% plus one kind of along the lines that you have here. And I'll tell you, all over the state, it ranges from 50% plus one to 60%, 66%, 75%, requiring it all the way there. But these are just our suggested numbers. If 10% is fine and 60% is fine, but I certainly would like your input on what those percentages may be.
My concern was just, is it legal to take?
Oh, yes,
tax
sir.
money
The
from them
process.
Based on this petition?
Yes, sir. It's a statewide approved process.
It's all
And
set by statute.
yeah.
I don't have a problem with it.
Mr. Chairman.
Let me follow up question for council real quick.
Yes, sir.
On the previous ones that were done through Suwannee County, do you know what percentage they required?
They had the 10% for the petition that they had up here, and then 50% plus one.
That they went with, they didn't set a higher percentage?
Yes, yes, sir.
This question would be to council. What if 5 years down the road is paved, and after the 5 years that individuals have paid this road off, an individual coming by property up in there, what would be the advantage, how would that come into play?
Well,
They have to come pay for buying that property at that time? It will be added to the property when they purchase it?
Let me back up and say, and give you an example that'll make it clearer. We've financed for this project 5 years, and each owner would pay it out in 5 years. But an owner comes in the third year, before the 5-year period is over. That new owner, beginning in the third year, would then pay the third, fourth, and fifth year to go with it. It actually runs with the dirt, not running with the person.
Okay.
There is another way that can be accomplished. The other way that it can be accomplished is they're required to pay it off at the time of sale. That's also an option. That
Did
does
the
occur.
new person come in,
the property.
and they'll actually, the old owner,
The seller
Raise the
increases
price
the
of
price to
the-
cover that cost,
Yeah.
that outstanding balance.
And that's typically the way, though, under the, with code enforcement stuff now. If you have a code enforcement lien against your property, you're required to notify the new owner of that, lien, and that lien, then I'm sure any lending institution would require it to be, paid off. So we can put that provision in there or not. Certainly, it'll just be for whatever the particular project is, whether it's 5 years or 7 years.
Gotcha. All right. Any further questions, Councilor, Mr. Harris?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. What type of projects are we talking about? Obviously, it sounds like it would be road projects, because that's about all we have in the county, correct?
That's the illustration I gave, but there are lots of things that can be done that, it has to be a benefit to the property. That's what the law says. So it could be street lighting, it can be a number of things. It can be sidewalks. There are just a number of things that can be included as an MSBU.
But let me follow up with that question, because I've got some situations where we have some people who are pushing hard to get some things done right away that's not in our timeline. And it looked like, from what I see on DOT's list, it's not in theirs either. In those situations, if they request, let's say, a road to be paved, and we're talking about these chip seals, what would stop them? I'm sure there has to be something in place where the county says, if we want to pave this road, we have to pave it according to our guidelines, which I don't think we have much, or at least our suggestions, and it can't be chip sealed, which is cheaper because of the traffic or whatever. So are you getting what my question is we get a group of people who say, we want our road chip sealed, but it's not a candidate for chip seal.
Well, they don't,
And-
am I wrong, but all they're doing is funding it through a loan. The construction's going to go through the county, correct?
Well, typically what you do is you bid it out.
Yeah, I mean, you bid it out.
We are essentially the administrator of the entire implementation of the program, so everything would be done here. what I would suggest is, if the board is interested in doing this, that you allow Mr. Brevett and I to come back with some additional information. I mean, that was the proposal, was not that you just adopt something tonight, but rather that you
Right.
tell us that you're interested, and we'll bring some additional language back, because I think that clearly, we would have to have a construction standard.
Yeah, you gotta have a
for
minimum
different
standard.
types of road. A chip seal project might be sufficient in a location where you're not gonna have semis run up and down it. But in other locations, it wouldn't work at all, and you'd have to require asphalt in those cases. So those issues are just issues that would need to be addressed.
Thank you, that's,
Well.
that's the answer to my question.
Yeah, only thing that I may add is when you go to pave a road and you got a certain amount of people down it, 60% leaves 40 out there that's fixed to pick up a tax bill that they may not want. I don't have a problem making that number higher.
I don't even, yeah.
'Cause if you force it on them, even at 60%, that's 40% of the people that you fixing to make pony up for a mile or so of paved road, whatever the bill winds up being. So I don't know if y'all, 70 would sit good with me.
I would say it's high as 75 personally, 3/4.
If nobody else has a problem with that, you got any comment, Mr.? I see your mouth moving.
And, Mr. Chairman, the reason why I would say so high is because we have roads that are very sparsely populated, and in situations where you've got a different option, and you have 10 people on a road, there's no way in the world they can, unless you have someone who's rich, who's willing to pick up a big tab on a mile-long road, that's a lot of money to be paying over.
Well, I guess that's where the public hearing comes into
So-
place as well.
Yeah, it requires an estimate on the cost of construction and all of that as well. I'm just gonna tell you, I've had to make those tough decisions before, and it was at 50% plus one. There was a large margin there for people to be offended and have their feelings hurt. But you have to have public hearings, and at the end of the day, the county commission has to make a decision. And if you are going to consider this, you need to consider the possibility that you may offend someone. And there may be more than one someone. At the same time, there are plenty of people that call saying, I've got emphysema, I can't stand this paved road anymore. Now, they might be able to afford to pay their fair share of the cost of an improvement, but they can't do it if you set the limit so high that, you allow a very small percentage to say, we're not going to improve this road because there are 5 of us that don't want it done.
Yeah.
So that's the other side of it. And I don't have a recommendation one way or the other. I'm just providing information to you. It can be difficult. You can find yourself offending someone. You can find yourself helping a lot of people. But they have to pick up the tab. It isn't at the expense of the general taxpayer at large out here.
Let me make another comment if I might, Mr. Chairman. Historically, what the county has done also when it's looking at any of the parcels on either side of the road, they look at parcel, if you own a piece that hits the road, and then they look also at what distance that you have. Historically, they've just said whatever and just to make it easy, $1 million. They would say that of the $1 million, 50% of that, $500,000, would be divided among however many parcel owners there are. And then the other $500,000 would be divided by the foot, how many feet that you have along the road. So they've taken, past boards have taken the idea of saying 50-50 parcel versus mileage along the road or feet along the road.
Feet.
I'm fine with that.
Mr. Chairman, one more question. And I don't know how Mr. Jenkins figures in values for tax-based purposes, but I would think that if there is an increase in value based upon an improvement to road frontage, that if someone is dealing with these types of these MSBUs, that they're not going to, until that property is, that bill has been paid in full, not have the property value increase because of the improvements. You understand what I'm getting at? They're already paying for the bill.
I understand where you're headed with that, But it's not something for this board to make that decision, that's for Mr. Jenkins to make that decision.
All right. Anything else?
So we're not trying to set a quota as far as a percentage tonight. You're just going to get something for the board to look at.
Mr. Harris and I will have an expanded idea going all the way down. We would like input from each of y'all as to what you think would be, an appropriate number there. Like I said, this was just a number I plugged in. So,
It's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you set it at 75 and you only get 74 to sign, now you upset 74% of them. Versus,
It's either way.
you know?
I'd be willing to go down 5%.
But
It's all in the math.
Yeah,
It's all math, that's right.
yeah,
it's not that I'm worried about offending somebody.
Yeah.
You fix to make them pay a tax bill for 5 years.
true.
well, it's just like a judge sitting up there in the case, no matter what happens, he's going to
Half gonna be mad. half gonna be
disillusion 50%, whatever. So like I said, I just picked a number to stick in there. So y'all please let us know.
60 is better than 50 plus 1. Mr. Hancock.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bo Hancock, 6135 Wiggins Road. Just two quick questions. Number one, this only applies to existing county roads or a county road coming in the future, correct? I mean, it's not,
Right.
you've got 10 people that live down a private road.
Well,
No,
It'll qualify for a private.
I can't,
think it would.
I haven't researched any of the case law on private roads. I mean, the whole private road conversation comes in the statutes. Typically, what we research, Mr. Pratt and I, would be, one, we can't take any publicly owned equipment on it. But I haven't ever researched the question of assisting a group on a private road subdivision on an MSBU. So I don't know that there would be a prohibition of that. It might, if there were, but there was sufficient support for it, it would be a matter of the board agreeing that it would become a public road at that point, because they were trying to comply with our other requirements. It has to be an improved road, and they're going to pay the expense themselves.
So we got county policy that individual or communities can meet certain criteria to bring their road up to standards that then it would become a county-maintained road, and this could be a tool that they utilize to come in compliance with that, I would think.
So basically, they get, if they have, enough of them agree, it's approved, the road is paved or whatever, then the county then has to maintain that pavement from now on.
If the county
agrees
accepts it.
to, if the county agrees to. And let me just say as well,
It's already a county-maintained road,
a private road.
outside of no, not a private road now.
Okay.
You've answered that one.
Okay.
But, it's a county road existing, you grade it, the MSBU goes in, 5 years later, it's paved, paid for, then the county taxpayers then will maintain, as we do now,
We would continue.
with
to evaluate-
DOT or
right.
whomever.
Everything else that we would typically do would, yes, sir. That's
Okay.
correct. We would continue.
That's it, thank you.
Commissioners, I'm going to tell you, this isn't a program that's for everyone. I've seen it work very successfully. At the same time, I've also seen people pretty upset about it in the public hearing. But I will say this, after years of doing these and having hands-on experience with them, I have never had anyone come back, and I'm talking about thousands of property owners with MSBU's for road improvements, never had one ever come back to me after it was paved and say, something, I wish you hadn't paved that road. That's never happened, not once.
Mr. Chairman, I could think of, I don't know how many of us could probably think of a couple places in our districts that we've had people who would say, we want it paved, and then other people would say, we don't want it paved, we don't want anything done, back and forth. This would be an obvious, good opportunity to have some of these residential areas on 5-acre lots. There's an opportunity to have the entire subdivision, taken care of in one fell swoop without having to go through years and years and years of waiting for one road to get paved. If they can't wait, I don't have a problem with them, let them pay for it. If they want to, then let them do it.
And Mr. Patton, correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't us saying whether we're going to allow it or not. It's allowed by statute. We're
Yeah.
just setting out the criteria that we want to go by, so if somebody comes down the road, we're not him hauling around trying to put a program together.
I understand that, I agree.
Yeah, you already have two groups that have contacted us with an interest. And we've said, just hold off. Let's see if the board is interested in putting a process in place, which if you are, then it also helps Mr. Pravat and I, because we can firm this up some and put some criteria in place that will help going forward as well.
Who is the guarantor of the loan? Would it be all the property
It's
owners?
against the property owners.
It's
Yeah,
against
the-
all the property.
Yeah, property.
Once the
lien.
there's a separate process that the tax collector ends up, collecting the money just like they do ad valorem taxes, except this would be a non-ad valorem tax assessment on their bill. And it would be collected just as if it was ad valorem taxes in the same statutory manner.
So non-payment of that on someone's tax bill constitutes non-payment of taxes, just like
And it'll
anything
go
else.
up for tax sale just like anything else.
And that's why counties put them on the tax bill. When
For that
they discover-
5-year period.
That's the way to collect it.
For that 5-year period.
For the 5 years or 7 years, whatever the board established with the lending agency.
Need this in a motion, or are we going to do it?
No, just need a consensus of the board if you're okay with
I'm fine
this.
with it.
If you got
Yeah.
some changes that you want to make to the policy that you see or the suggestions that you see.
I'm fine.
I can live with 60% if everybody else can. 65 would be better for me.
I was willing to come down to 70%, come on.
I mean, you're still going to hold a public hearing. It's not guaranteed.
Right. Well, let's just move forward. I'm okay with it. We'll move forward, and then we'll do the elemental details at a later time.
Agree. Yep, I'm good with it.
Mr. Chairman, I will also say that this becomes incredibly valuable as our population continues to increase in these old platted subdivisions with unpaved roads. We're going to see more and more of this. The reason we have so many grader operators today on these roads is because so many more people have moved into these locations. Years ago, we ran half the graders and serviced the entire county, but we had fewer people using those roads. Today, they're being well used. So this is going to become a real need for some people, and they'll be coming to this board, and it won't be too far out.
No, I've had several phone calls on it. I got one subdivision off of 104th. That's especially since the chip and seal article. If it qualifies under it, they're very interested in it. And it would be a good candidate for the chip and seal and this program.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm not certain that it will qualify.
I know that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's.
But, on all of these projects, there'll be different levels that you'll want to do, whether, it gets down to where it's a way secondary road in the back of a, subdivision, or whether it happens to be a road like the last one that I'm familiar with out there by Camp Weed, that big road, that big graded road, got paved, like there, and there's a lot of traffic going along there. So you have different standard that you would probably do in each circumstance. And that'll be up to the engineers that, when we're, as part of this process in here, to make the estimated cost, the engineers will say what needs to be done and then give the cost for that.
I'll say that if the board is going to continue to allow a semi-truck driver to drive home after work in his semi into a subdivision and park it on the side of the road, then it'd be a good idea to stick with asphalt roads. Because I've seen that in residential. Well, I call it residential.
The problem we get into on the semis, a residential subdivision goes anywhere from a half-acre lot to 20 acres.
I know, and most of them are still zoned agriculture, and that's my point.
Yeah.
Because they're allowed to do that. So if that's going to continue to occur, then I would venture that the majority need to be asphalt roads.
We can leave it
Mr.
at that.
Chairman,
Yes.
Seems like it's part of this process that the county road department, and you may already have it, but had this conversation before, and that is about having a process by which you define whether that road is going to qualify for a chip seal or must qualify for a pavement process, in which we would then hand it off to our engineers to look at and give us the estimates and such.
Yeah.
Where a chip seal road is not so easily, or it's not so complex, is that correct? It's not so complex in the siding. So ought we not to have a process written down in place that says this is how we determine it?
Well, yes, sir, and quite frankly, I didn't get the opportunity to look to see whether the chip seal will actually qualify, under state requirements.
Okay.
Whether they have allowed those things in the past. And I just didn't get a chance to get to
We
it
have a
tonight.
list.
I'm going to have
Mr.
to.
Pravat and I actually have a list of things that we're going to be researching because we had several questions come in, even from some of you commissioners. Is this allowed, is that allowed? And I said, well, give us time to research some of that. Clearly, the asphalt road construction is allowed, and there are plenty of examples of that, but some of the other questions, which could be cost savings, we need to do a little research on. And we'll bring that back to you.
All right. Anything else? If not, we'll move on. All right. Moving on to 19, discuss possible board action, any items related to the state's attorney's office.
Mr. Chairman, I really don't, there's some minor things we continue to work on. I'll just tell you, you've probably seen us out there working on the Mizell building. Some other minor things, we're still waiting on our sign for out in front of the state attorney's office, but for the most part, everyone appears to be happy that works at the state attorney's office, and I'm thankful for that. So we'll continue to make whatever minor adjustments we need to and continue to wrap things up over there.
Not to hold you to it, but do we kind of have a timeline on the Mizell's building on when you think we may be wrapping that up?
No, sir, I don't. And there's a reason for that. I'm working with an unconventional structure and trying to be as cost effective as I can. So I want to finish the block portion. My plan right now is for us to reconstruct the roof ourselves, to bring it back out over the block. My thought at this time is that we probably bid out the metal to cover the west side and the north side, which the board had previously authorized us to bid. But I've held off on that because we may also build the loading dock that we talked about building on the west side.
Yeah, I was just thinking about getting some of that stuff out of the upstairs that Supervisor Election has stored over there. I didn't know if we'd have time to do it
Well,
before they started getting into some of the elections coming up next year when they started moving that equipment. I didn't want to have to move it twice.
yeah, the thing with that is that probably the front portion of that building, unless we can frame something in and create some climate-controlled storage in the back, that's, the reason that's upstairs is because of the climate control.
I
So
understand.
that's going to take a little longer, and once I'm confident that that storage area is more stable than it is today, there's some bracing and some things that I want to take care of and some foundational issues, fairly minor, but they just need to be done, and then we'll get in there and see what more we can do.
Gotcha. Well, I don't have anything else on that. Is that all you have?
That's it on that.
Anybody else have anything from the sheriffs? Moving on to public concerns and comments. Anyone from the public wishes to speak? Make your way, state your name, address for the record. Hearing none. Going on to item 22, administrators' comments. Got anything else, Mr. Harris?
I'm just going to say that I'm taken aback by the report that we got from DOT. I was not expecting that. And it's certainly not the gentleman's fault that showed up here today. I've been calling for better than a month trying to find out what I could about this list that we got today, and I haven't heard much. Now I understand why. But this is a significant change from what we have experienced in the past several years. Now, some of these projects that are on this list are very expensive projects. But my hope is that, and let me just say for the public's benefit, and maybe commissioners that might not be familiar with this, until about, I think it was 2 years ago, everyone was using DOT's estimates on the cost per mile. Might have been 3 years ago. So DOT was pretty much establishing the costs per mile for road construction, and that's what everyone was using. Recently, DOT and local communities discovered that those estimates were way too low. So as we continued then in those preceding years to apply for more projects, we recognized that it was becoming a little more difficult to get any assurances from DOT that our projects were going to be funded, but it was because they were trying to catch up on those years that they continued to estimate the projects too low. That's why I asked the question about when are we going to get to the end of that cycle, where hopefully we can go from 3 projects a year back to, 5 projects a year or something of that nature. And I don't know when that's going to occur, but I hope it's soon, because we certainly have far more need than we have local funding to take care of. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Moving on to board members' inquiries, requests, and comments. Start down here, Commissioner Richardson.
I have none.
Mr. Fleming,
I have a couple.
go ahead.
I thought Mr. Harris was going to mention one about the Nettie Basin site, about the parking, quarterback club. But I attended the quarterback club meeting last night, and they started discussion about NJ ROTC utilizing Nettie Basin site. So they voted last night to approve it. And I brought to their attention, I said, well, we do ads at, during football season. And if we do a trade-off, we pay them, they utilize our area, we get a free ad. So we don't have to vote on it, we just do a consensus if we could let them utilize that space what Mr. Harris was talking about. And the ad, they give us a free ad.
I think we talked about it before, and as long as we're not liable for anything, I'm great with it.
What I'm saying, we pay $25 for the ad.
Yeah, no,
Each
I'm talking about
commissioner,
liable as far as
Yeah.
anybody gets flat tire, driving
Yeah,
it off.
Mr. Pravat can come up with a one-paragraph indemnification agreement for them to sign.
And
Yeah, we don't
In
even
any
do flat
event,
tires.
we can handle that, and then the quarterback club would be able to utilize it and handle the parking and reciprocate with those counties that charge us when we go to their locations to watch the football games. We're all about reciprocating.
We had talked about putting
Gate.
a new
Opening.
gate and an opening,
Yeah,
it needs to be a little wider.
yeah.
right. The old gate that's out there was not put in by us. Commissioner Richardson asked about that. That's the old school gate where the children came in from the bus stop. But, yeah, I would venture that they'd have to put a larger opening down there at the end
Or from Model T Fords.
and make it, make it one-way traffic headed out to the south. So we'll address those issues.
And one more thing, Mr. Chairman, I thought Greg would have mentioned it about the fly, and I had the opportunity to fly in a plane on Friday. And the opportunity was great. Riding over Suwannee County, it's a very beautiful city. So I really enjoyed that. I said I'm going to try to get my pilot license now, start piloting the plane. But it was my first time. It was an experience of being in a small aircraft, but I think it was well. And I say tip my hat to Greg and Nate and to Fire Rescue. Yeah, they did a good job, and it was very interesting out there.
You weren't worried about it picking up with you in there?
Well, it was two of us, my wife and then and the pilot, so.
I got you. Moving on, Mr. Hale.
I don't have anything, other than the fly-in was great. I heard a lot about it. I never made it past the parking lot, unfortunately, but it was a bunch of people out there. They had a great time.
Mr. Sessions.
I just want to know, Commissioner Fleming, did you have goggles and a scarf on?
No, I just had a headset on.
Okay.
I had on a headset, and I don't want to take it away from you again. It was an experience. I have a grandson, he's very enthused about airplanes. Anytime he hear an engine, he always say, airplane. So I thought that they were going to be here, but they didn't make it, but it was an experience.
I do have one more thing.
Yes.
I'd like to make sure in the record that I say it out loud that we authorize the bid for 29th Road tonight. I want to make sure that's in the minutes
We'll have T-shirts made up.
for people to read that we're going to pave 29th Road. Just want to make sure everybody knows that.
We'll get some signs out there, Commissioner.
I don't have anything for tonight, so if y'all don't have anything further, just need one more thing, fellas.
Motion adjourned.
Motion adjourned by Commissioner Fleming.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Sessions. Y'all have a good evening.
All right. I'm going to send it.